Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing The Spirit of the Samurai, a side-scrolling Souls-like game released on the 12th of December 2024 for PC. The Spirit of the Samurai tells the story of Takeshi, a young samurai capable of communicating with tree spirits called Kodama. Following a restless dream, Takeshi awakens only to find his village under attack by demonic creatures under the command of a powerful Oni named Shuten-doji. Faced with an onslaught of monsters as well as their undead minions, Takeshi is forced to take up arms and defend his loved ones from a cruel fate while facing off against unspeakable monstrosities inspired by Japanese mythology and folklore. The game's narrative is mainly conveyed via beautifully rendered cutscenes that were a feast for the eyes, with top-notch cinematic direction that had me forgetting I was playing a video game at times, as it veered straight into the high-quality levels of filmmaking territory. The story's presentation is definitely one of the title's standout aspects and is further enhanced by authentic voice acting provided by actors of Japanese heritage. Story aside, the other thing that immediately stood out to me when I started my playthrough was the game's unique take on character animation, which utilizes a stop-motion approach that provides a welcome unsettling vibe to the whole experience, especially when it comes to enemy movement, since the abrupt motions of the abominations you'll get to face make them even more eerie and terrifying when combined with their imaginative design. Said artistic choice was definitely a masterstroke, since it cemented a truly dark and at times claustrophobic ambience that evoked a sense of constant pressure and dread, completely immersing me in Takeshi's ordeal and solidifying the horror aspect of the title as one of brutality and oppression. When it comes to setting, the game's version of a demon-infested feudal Japan is perhaps one of the most impressively terrifying realms I have ever had the pleasure of traversing. The whole thing starts slow by first having you experience the eerie peace and quiet of Takeshi's village, which gives off a sense of tradition, before thrusting you in increasingly twisted and demented areas as the Oni infestation not only births abominations but also warps the environment in new and horrific ways, at times making you feel as if you are traversing living tissue. Every single step you take while in Takeshi's world could veritably be your last, since, aside from the deadly foes you will get to face, the setting is filled to the brim with traps and ambushes that could take you down in one hit. This becomes evident from early on, once you flee down an underground system of tunnels full of spikes that can come from above and below, and remains a constant source of dread throughout the playthrough, an aspect of the game which I thought did a great job of further hammering down just how fatal every moment of your experience can be. Now, as much as I loved the world's visual design, I must say that I was quite disappointed from its actual traversal. All in all, The Spirit of the Samurai is a near completely linear experience with bare-bones exploration and a noticeable lack of creativity in terms of level design, especially as you progress later in the game. The most in-depth exploratory aspect of the title relates to certain areas of the map that feature several different branches you can take, most of which lead to smaller rooms that are full of consumable collectibles such as fruit, tea, and incense, which are items that can also be looted from defeated enemies. More specifically, the environment has places where it allows you to move up or down floors as well as enter and exit rooms by moving in depth, which you do by tilting the movement controls in that direction. The problem with said rooms is that they can feel quite repetitive and not that rewarding to explore, something related to the game's inadequate diversity of collectibles, which I will be covering in a moment. With the exception of these instances of investigation, the rest of the game's biomes mostly felt like corridors full of traps or enemies, which at times kind of overstayed their welcome. I should also mention that there is a map present here, though I didn't really find much use for it since I couldn't actually revisit or even scroll over previous areas I had passed through, and the overview simply showed you the percentage of completion for the stage you were currently located in terms of enemies killed and secrets found, the latter of which I was a bit confused by since, as far as I could tell from my experience, there was one actual secret place you could find which was later in the game, though I could have definitely missed something. About the collectibles I found, they were divided into three different categories, those being consumables, offerings, and combo move scrolls. Consumables related to items such as healing and stamina potions as well as ranged weapons like arrows and kunai, all of which can be assigned to a cross that corresponds to your D-pad, which happens via the inventory menu of the game and through which you can make quick use of them. Offerings were connected to certain shrines you find across the setting, which are utilized like Soulsborne bonfires in that they allow you to level up your character and also acquire new items or sell old ones. Leveling up occurs via experience you gain by defeating enemies, a process which yields ability points that you can then spend on a shrine to raise one of 4 different statistics, namely strength, resistance, dexterity, and your your bow damage. The item exchange I mentioned refers to your ability to sell items you have found and get incense in return, which you can then spend to purchase consumables such as the aforementioned healing potions, arrows, and kunai knives, among others. Combo move scrolls relate to combat, which I will be breaking down shortly. Now, my main gripe with the game's collectibles is that it felt like there weren't that many types of them, which eventually made exploration grow stale since I soon figured out I had already seen what there was to see of items available. What especially feels like a missed opportunity is the lack of any kind of equipment discoverables, such as new weapons and maybe armor pieces, which I think would have truly elevated the experience. On the topic of combat, this was definitely the main focus when it comes to Takeshi's gameplay, and I'm glad to say it was quite solid for the most part. On a basic level, Takeshi is capable of taking down foes both in close quarter fights with his katana as well as from a distance by utilizing his bow or kunai. When it comes to the bow, Takeshi can draw it out in an instant and start shooting a hail of arrows at his enemies, though said arrows are not infinite, so you'll have to keep an eye out on them. There are also different types of arrows, such as flaming ones, as well as the aforementioned kunai, which are of varied efficiency. The swordplay of the game was a welcome surprise since it is both tactical as well as frenetic depending on your own approach. Despite his armor, Takeshi is quite nimble and can run and dodge roll in order to position himself behind his enemies and flank them, from which point he can initiate a hectic combo attack that usually results in an execution animation for many of the foes you'll get to take down. You are also able to parry enemy attacks, which then leave them open to counter attacks of your own if you get the timing right. Of note here is the fact that as you progress through the game and level up your character, you'll get to unlock new moves which you can then mix and match via the combat menu screen, effectively creating new types of combos based on your own preferences and battle necessities at any given moment, which provides a welcome element of fighting diversity into the mix. This is also where the aforementioned combo move scrolls come into play, since a few of those attacks you will have to find instead of gain by leveling up, though to be honest, the most powerful assaults do come from upgrading your character, making the collectible moves kind of unnecessary. Staying a bit on combat, I do have one complaint to voice here, and that is what I can only describe as an occasional lack of consistency in terms of hit reactions. More specifically, there were times when I would hit enemies and witness them stagger, leaving them open to more attacks, and other times when those exact same attacks would have no stagger effect whatsoever during the same combat scenario, though this was a manageable issue and I eventually learned to work around it. Now, you may have noticed that I mentioned the term Takeshi's gameplay when I started talking about combat, and the reason for that is the fact you also get to play as two more characters during your playthrough, namely a Kodama spirit as well as a cat. The few instances of gameplay with our feline friend were completely stealth oriented with some basic platforming thrown in there, with your discovery by enemies resulting in instant death and retrial. The Kodama pretty much felt like Takeshi but in a smaller version and with the ability to use energy to heal instead of healing potions, as well as a skill to throw an energy burst at the enemies. I wish I could say these two additions provided some extra variety in terms of at least exploration, but it was only the cat that spiced things up a bit with some instances of diverse gameplay, with the Kodama being too close in gameplay to our samurai protagonist and mainly being there as a plot device. Platforming wise, aside from a few jumping instances to avoid traps and ascend to higher ground, I didn't get a chance to experience anything complex here with any of the three characters. As for the game's bosses, I'm saddened to say that things ended up being quite underwhelming compared to expectations. Now, while the actual design of the big bads was phenomenal and the cutscenes introducing them were sublime, the actual fights were very disappointing, ranging from chaotically confusing to simplistically tedious. In essence, there were certain clashes against villains where I wasn't entirely sure if my attacks would land and also wasn't sure how they would react to them, resulting in hectic matches where at times I would die within mere seconds of the fight starting, and there were also some battles that were easy to a fault and didn't really contain much in terms of elevated stakes. The bosses themselves were amazing to look at, and some of them were also built up to be these terrifying creatures story-wise, but the resulting skirmishes were less than ideal. As for the game's difficulty, I'd situate the Spirit of the Samurai on the harder side of things, with much of its challenge being born of the legions of enemies and insta-death traps the game threw at you at times, as well as some questionably placed checkpoints and the aforementioned inconsistency in combat, which also bled into the boss fights. In terms of length, it took me a bit over 5 hours to complete the game with about 100% completion rate, placing it on the shorter side of things. Before we conclude, I do wish to make reference to a couple of bugs I came across during the game, which I do consider minor. First, at the start of the game, following the combat tutorial, I got stuck and couldn't move, which required required of me to restart from the latest checkpoint, at which point the issue was solved. Second, when I first took control of the Kodama, the game informed me of the ability to use an energy blast in order to both hit enemies as well as shatter some obstacles by pressing the R1 button on my PS4 controller. After about 20 minutes of trying to use it and failing, I accidentally discovered that I first had to crouch and then press R1 for it to work, so do keep that in mind in case you also come across this issue. There were also a few incredibly trivial movement glitches here and there, but nothing worth noting. In conclusion, the Spirit of the Samurai both entertained and underwhelmed me. I was blown away by the game's direction and visual approach. I was thoroughly creeped out by its stop-motion animation and oppressive ambience. I found the overall enemy and boss design to be phenomenal, and I had a lot of fun with combat for the most part. On the other hand, the game's world felt quite bare bones in terms of creative stage design and exploration available. The boss fights were disappointing, and the gameplay variety I had hoped would have been added by the use of the cat and Kodama turned out to be insufficient. The Spirit of the Samurai would have made a fantastic movie, but as a game it leaves a lot to be desired and struggles to fulfill the potential set up by its demo. It can definitely entertain you for a few hours if you temper your expectations and if the visual design and vibe speaks to you, but if you're looking for something with adequate gameplay depth, you may end up disappointed. My final verdict on the Spirit of the Samurai is 6 out of 10. What did you think about the Spirit of the Samurai? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!